Hey everybody, welcome back to the shop. It's Foster here with another Projects with Foster, and today we're talking about abrasives. That's right, abrasives. Think of sandpaper, right? That's our most common type of abrasive. A lot of people think of power sander first thing, and we use these a lot, but in here, for the most part, we use these for finishing work. Now when you're sanding, you start with a larger grit. This is a 60 grit, which means for every square inch in here, there's 60 pieces of whatever you got on there, sand. And so as the number gets higher, the grit gets lower. So you start with a higher grit, 60 or an 80, and then you move to 120 and then a 150, and then we finish up with something like a 220 at the very end just to smooth things out. But we have another thing that we use abrasives for in here, and that's shaping. So these guys we're using for finishing. So we're getting rid of all of our pencil marks, we're getting rid of our machine lines, and we're smoothing it out in the end. As you can see on my name sign, I'm to the point that I've routed in my name, but now I need to take the next step. And I'm going to use the sanders, the belt sanders, to finish this, to shape this. And then I would come back over here and sand off the rest of it. One of the things I see people do is they get to this point and then they come over and grab the sander. Well, you still got a lot of work to do on that. You're not ready for that step yet. But one thing you can do is we've got a bunch of these scraps that were in our sanders that are now just scraps. And one thing you can do is come around and just kind of clean up around your letters. Get rid of some of the darker pencil marks. And the little fuzz that's left behind when you router, you want to get rid of that as well. But that's much better with a piece in your hand rather than the sander itself. Another little trick we have that I learned in the Navy is to take your piece, and if you've got something round like this and you want to try to sand that, you can't really get something like this in here. But we got old sanding belts and we can make strips out of them, and then you can sand this way. It's a wonderful thing. It's kind of a fun thing to do, and it's a good way to get inside something. So we're going to come back to these guys, but first we're going to go and I'm going to show you a couple of our power shapers, which includes the spindle shaper and then a small belt sander. So come on this way. Over here. So here's a couple of our other sanding devices. We've got, this is a spindle sander. As you can see, it's got a round drum on it that goes up and down. And so for something like this, that's ideal because I'm going to be able to get inside here. You can change these drums, have bigger and smaller drums. And when they're new, these things go up and down. So you're not just sanding on that one spot on here. A lot of time that action breaks. And so we have to stack up pieces to get it up higher. This one still works. One thing, if you're ever going to change these, this is a backwards thread. All right, so that means if you turn this to the left to loosen it, you're really tightening it and you're going to snap it, so don't do that. All right, so if I'm sanding this, I want something round. I'm not using a lot of pressure. I'm letting the tool do the work. You got an electric motor in there, let it do the work. And then keep checking. You don't want to take off too much, but it's a great way to get inside an area that would be really hard to get otherwise. This other fella next to me here is just a belt sander, but with a real thin belt. This is just a 1-inch belt. And this is great for getting in a place that you wouldn't be able to get the bigger sander on. So I can get in here, I can get inside some of these, or it's just nice for smaller pieces. You don't want to go anywhere near those big shapers with small pieces. You'll lose them for one thing. They'll get sucked up the vacuum and we never know where they go then. This also has a disc on it that you can sand whenever you have a disc. Remember, you're only going to be on half of it. We'll show you over there when we get to the big one. But these are nice for getting in small areas. Works wonderfully. Creates a lot of dust. Don't forget that. Good idea to wear a mask when you're doing that. All right, so now I'm going to take you over to the shaper table, and what I want you to see here is I've got my corners blacked out. I'm going to round those corners over, and instead of using, a saw or a router or something, I'm just going to use our shaper table. I also have this line here. This is where I cut my board with my hand saw, so it's not a perfectly square cut. So I'm just going to take it over to the shaper table, and I'm going to basically sand that off. Now remember, this is real light white pine. This is very easy to sand. If this were a piece of maple or something like that, you might not want to sand that never more than 1/4 inch. Okay? Come on over here. So we've got a couple of these, a large vertical belt sander. So this thing has a belt, spins this way, and then it has a disc that spins as well, all connected. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have my material flat on here before I start, and then after this is running, I'm just going to keep my piece moving on here, and we'll get in close so you can see. All I'm doing is sanding off down to my line, and that's why I've got such nice, good, dark lines, because it's much easier to see what's there. So obviously, this is a machine that you want to be real careful with. Never try to lift anything up on here. A couple things can happen. One, all of the force is going this way, so it wants to slam it back down, but you've got this groove in the table here, and if your piece gets caught in there and caught on that belt, it usually rips the belt, and it's very exciting, and you don't want that to happen. Now, if you're doing it on this side, you always want to make sure, because this thing is spinning this way, you never want to set your material here, because when that spins, it's going to want to pick it up. So you're always on this half of it. So for this, I'm setting it down there. My vacuum is on. And I'm just going to eat away at these corners. Hardly any pressure on there. You got 60 grit on these belts. And now I'm getting close. I want to be real careful, not go too far. There. The flat part's a little trickier. Doesn't always come out flat. So you got to keep it moving. So I'm down to where I can just barely see some pencil line. Now, all right, and then if you're going to use the disc, again, always on the left side of the disc. And these guys take off a lot of wood quickly. You gotta pay attention. You gotta keep it moving. There we go. Voila. So I've rounded the corners. I squared off my end. Now I go back over and I start with this. I don't need to do 80 grit. I could probably start 120. I get rid of all my pencil lines. I get rid of all of my machine lines, including these that I put in with the shaper tables here. And then I finish up with something very exciting. One of my favorite inventions of the last century. Sandpaper that's a sticker. Look at that, it's a sticker. So all you gotta do now, who doesn't love stickers? Come on, look at that. So now I can come back and clean up all my marks and clean up my machine lines. Abrasives, they're your friend, and use them wisely. All right, thanks a lot. Waukesha.